A lot of questions are unanswered when it comes to legalities. There's a lot of ambiguity out there. There are a lot of people working on it in the city of Atlanta and County and to make it more customized so we can know what's legal and what's not legal and how we can do it legally. But there's a lot of us who have been doing it for a while are using the old ask forgiveness, not permission technique. Yeah.
I got a question. I want to know, southern counties like Fulton County still have a lot of laws on the books that are advantageous to agriculture in general, such as, the pigs and the chickens here in Atlanta. Were y'all able to capitalize on any, old time just agricultural legal infrastructure that was already in place?
One of the things that we have come to realize just recently is how, at least it's new for me, is to understand city ordinances and to understand that if it's not expressly written, then it can be shut down by the complaint of another citizen or another resident. So that's not just for urban farms, that's for a garden, that's for a beehive in your backyard, whatever. So capitalizing off of some of these old laws, it's really going back to what Judith says here. Most of us grow because this is what we do. And we started it, and we're now being brought into the discussion about policy, being brought into the discussion about zoning, and these gatherings such as this will only add more pressure and also bring in more intelligent minds into the conversation because, Joe and I, and Judith, we do the work that we do, but there's only so many hours in the day. So if you want to have top quality food at the farmer's market or in your CSA, then we really have to bring other people in to address the issues about the zoning. And never let it stop you from growing food. Because as we know, the universities and our government systems are always at minimum 10 years behind what the public is demanding to do. So that's a minimum. You go into the schools now and they're still teaching things that are outdated as far as it comes to chemistry and biology, completely outdated. And quantum physics and all this kind of things is dealing with something else. So it's the same thing for us in this agricultural movement. So it's good to want to protect yourself. It's definitely good to want to have clarity on all that. And at the same time, it's more important that we have clean food. It's vastly more important because we understand what's happening with GMOs, we understand what's happening with malnutrition, obesity, and all of these things. So right now, Denise Quarles, the gentleman talked about, there's also Brother Stewart here, they're working with the, I want to say it right, Office of Sustainability.
Mayor's Office of Sustainability, but I have to say that I'm no longer with the mayor's office.
Okay, well then don't crowd him, but he does still know. He might be bored at this point. So you want to know that, man, because we've had conversations with them, and there's the mayor's office of sustainability, and there's like Sustainable Atlanta, which is something that's not governmental. So there are external organizations working with governmental organizations, and all trying to decide how this works, keeping in mind that there are major corporations that have a lot at stake if we all are able to start growing our food locally. So these are not going to be easy issues.
Well, there's a lot of, lease arrangements, lease agreements. There's no clear roadmap. When you're dealing with a municipality, there's a code written, and Eugene was saying, if it's not expressly allowed, then you can not only be shut down, but you can also be fined pretty significantly. So for urban agriculture folks like ourselves, that might be one of those, ironically, I feel like it's one of those issues I dodge. I don't even want to talk about it because I don't know what the answer is, and I feel like if I go ask, I'll just be inviting trouble for myself. So it's really exciting now to know that City of Atlanta is working really hard to get urban agriculture expressly allowed in most zonings in the city, and now we're really excited for us in DeKalb County for them to, also be expressing an interest in putting this into the code to make our businesses expressly allowable because, I don't know how it works with Truly Living Well or other operations in the city, but we can't can't actually get a business license, which is totally required for us to operate and have a business. Now that doesn't stop me from selling, I don't know, a million vegetables or something. But maybe not a million, I'm just kidding.
Radishes and carrots.
But anyhow, so it's definitely one of those things that we need to address. But like Eugene was saying, folks on the farm or folks that are busy doing, you know, the work of growing and marketing and educating. I don't know that we know the legalese or we have like the rapport to speak with folks that are working in those governmental capacities or those folks that could also help us bridge that divide to get it allowed to.
I know you had a question. I do want to just say really quickly, because I said my goal to ask for forgiveness, not permission thing. That has been costly to us. There were a few instances I can think of that I wish we had known what we needed before we got fined. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't even look at that too. So all right. All right, a little bit bigger. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to comment on Eugene used the phrase expressly permitted, and I would expand that a little bit. When we start right now in Atlanta, and I guess both really any populated town is going to require a building permit, even for a chicken coop. I recently found out. I mean, they're looking for fees anywhere they can get them. And then the placement of, we went down to put up a greenhouse recently because of the zoning grid and the different rules, even though I got 40 open 3 acres that are just, land and cars, we couldn't put a greenhouse on that land because of the zoning grid. The place that told us we could put it won't work because of the sunlight. So you got to be real careful. If you start hammering the nail, they tell me at the city, you're probably going to need a building permit.
That's good to know. Going back to Lisa really quickly and talking about resources that are out there, I don't know if you're going to stay for the whole time, but do you have model leases on the Georgia Organic site? Do you know?
I think you do. I think you have a land, owner, land wanted section where we try to marry, and we get a lot of calls from landowners. So if you're interested in kind of want to be touched on this, I would suggest you call Don Cooper, our partnerships coordinator, and just use some of the resources we know about being underneath.
Did everybody get that? Don Cooper at Georgia Organics is the guy to talk to if you're looking for land and you want to be connected. And also on the Georgia Organic site, there are model leases. There's a whole pack for working with landowners. And there are other ones out there too. There's a New England Land Institute has some good leases. Yes.
I'm just curious. I'm looking for land that are this room right now. I'm just looking
Can I just touch on the insurance effort? Is there a recommendation from what type of age from your experience? You guys have run into, is there a better agency or a better group?
The way it worked for me is I just went to that first farmer that I worked for and I asked Nicholas, I was like, who's your adjuster, where do you purchase this policy? And so I'd be happy to share it. It's Jones, Ewing, Dobbs, and Tamplin. They're based in Covington and Madison. And they don't actually write insurance policies, they look for insurance policies, but the guy Mr. Ewing, he used to work for the Farm Bureau, so he really loves to search out farm policies for folks.
Could you say that name again, please?
Jones, Ewing, Dobbs, and Tamplin. I might even get a discount if you but he's been really helpful. So the guy that I initially worked for is like a 30-acre farm, and I was trying to get a policy for a 5-acre farm. And he was like, I just assumed that all insurance policies looked the same, but he had to actually hunt around for a couple of months to come up with the one that fit our size, fit our model, and the products that we were growing with that.
And, in general, our experience has been, even
Mr. Will Harris from White Pastures.
So, let's look at what's next on our list. Did we cover leases well enough?
Yes.
Okay. We started to dig into legal issues. Are there other legal issues we want to talk about that anybody struggling with specific legal issues?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, I won't get into too much, but how's around ground site remediation? Here's ground site. I think that could be better. So, do you mind if I guarantee that contaminants will be food as well? Most folks just want to correctly mobile. So little things like that. If anyone has any thoughts, we hear that there's lots of federal money available for ground site rehab, but those contracts usually go to very big developers like municipal properties.
Anybody from the EPA in the room?
Are you in the city of Atlanta?
Yes.
Because it's been very favorable working with Investment Management and the city of Atlanta on brownfield funding. They have a revolving store of funds. And Garland Brown is widely with in the city of Atlanta. I recall them.
Thank you.
Can I write Garnett's name up here?
Garland's not with the Investment Management.
With the city of Atlanta?
With the city of Atlanta.
Garnett Brown?
And he's the one that's having the brownfield funding.
Okay. All right.
You're gonna be here, but we still need to move this forward. Yes, sir.
But Eugene, the other side of that coin is when you're in the environment, as my organization is, where you want to be involved in sustainability, you want to be involved in concrete farms, but the local government is dead set against it. I mean, I'm in a situation where the local NQ leadership have made it very clear, using those words, that if you're not African American, we do not want you in our area. No matter what your intention is, no matter what your expertise and the programs and the money you're going to bring in, it is absolutely not going to happen. So if we continue to do this type of work under the radar for as much as we are possible, as much as possible, we certainly do expect friends of those organizations, the Atlanta Police Department, to start serving the block and issuing citations, as has happened to various developers in that area. Suddenly you're in violation of rivershed rates, sediment, and they'll find a reason to load you up with 2 grams worth of ticket per day if they can, every single day. So it's great to pretend, well, it's great to not want to manifest the negativity, but to be in compliance is almost, it's your only protection. You have to be able to say something to court and say, no, I'm doing everything right, I'm doing everything according to the law. Because there are people that say, play with it, and they're looking for a way to stymie progress.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, but I also think you made a really good point that we have a lot more to get through. We've spent our first hour already. We have 1 hour, and we've gotten through lease agreements and legal issues. And I know that this is y'all's list, and I want to be respectful and try to get through as much of it as I can. Do we want to move into startup resources?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Now let's move away from legal. It's so heavy. Startup resources. Everybody knows you have to start with a little land, right, and a little water, and some equipment, or at least some tools and some labor. How do you find those things? We talked a little bit about finding land. Is anybody here struggling with finding land? No, you are. You want to find land? Okay. So we listed some resources. The Georgia Organic site. Don Cooper in the office can help connect you with land. Networking is a great way, and sometimes just being open to it. It's amazing what can come if you just open your heart and your mind and you believe believe that it's gonna happen. Things happen. I don't have any other specific tools about finding land. Do you all?
I have a suggestion.
Yes,
The land bank authority.
the land bank.
Land authority.
You're gonna get like VIP in the session. Fulton, Atlanta Land Bank Authority.
Yes, Mike does it. They're always hating me. But I need his counsel.
Are they, can I ask a question, Michelle?
Yes.
Because they're a land bank authority, are they empowered then to go around some of these blocks that might attach to the land? Because of zoning codes or whatever, because they're a land bank authority?
Not necessarily, but then they have vacant property in it. And you're still gonna have to look at what the ordinances are, but at least they'll be able to help you identify some land potential. Because they have quite a bulk of land right now,
Yeah.
and houses, and
90 properties in it right now.
9,000.
No, 90 properties that are free and clear. What happens, they go into the land bank and the tax burden that was on the land is released, and then it's back in the city's hands. I think they have 90 properties right now that are free and clear that could be.
Great, that's a great resource. Water, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I think the two most critical things after land are access to water for irrigation and then a market. Like you have to know where you're gonna sell things before you start growing. You don't wanna figure that out as you're going things about it.
Great, you want a little familiarity with where you can market and how you can market.
We, as far as water goes, just this year we were able to put 2 wells on 2 different sites of ours, and we worked with the NRCS, which is the National Resource Conservation Services, through the Department of Agriculture, and they will do matching funds for people who are going to put a well on a property. I think they'll match it to about half of that, half of the cost of the well. Is it 90?
Yeah, 75 and 90.
Okay. Thank you. That's much better.
I just want to say right now is actually a really good time to go to banks. All banks have a list of properties, and if it's particularly a bank that's doing well, they have a list of properties that they own, very clear, that have been either foreclosed on, that they're trying to get rid of, that is at half price. Every last one of my banks has this list. All you have to do is go to the bank and ask which banker can access that for you. Another good resource, I think, is also, particularly within the city of Atlanta, there's so many developments and developers here. Go straight to the developer. Ask them what they need for their property to try to retain the value, to try to get people into their community. Right now is a really good time for developers and subdivisions to have something on their property that sets them apart, because HOAs are going bankrupt left and right. So if you're farming on their property and you can say that you can give them a certain percentage that actually funds their homeowners association, that's money coming into an association that is able to take care of their own property. That, that's kind of getting into partnerships and land ownership and land use.
Well, like Guy Gardens, for example, the farm is a capital investment of the communities, but I wouldn't say that it necessarily directly improves the value of the homes. I don't know that it really brings like the price that you could sell your house for up, but it does increase the sellability of it. So there's that social capital of people coming in and they want to buy a residence very close to a farm and be connected to it as well.
And a lot of homeowners associations have stipulations set in place where they're not allowed to grow food in the front lawns anyways for individual homes. So they'd be really receptive to taking a vacant plot of land in that neighborhood and developing that towards the agricultural design.
I'll say this only because the opportunity has been presented to me recently. Property management companies for apartment complexes are also offering up land as well. I manage a property for Columbia Residential, to where they were like, why do we need all these flowers? Put food here. They hired me to do that. So some of these property management companies are waking up as well too. And bear in mind, the big one like a Gable or a Post, they got property all over the place.
And all of these great resources are important. One of the ones that we found and that I've seen in all throughout the nation. It's a great one. It's to deal with faith-based organizations. And here in Atlanta, a lot of the faith-based organizations and churches in particular have huge pieces of property. And they're just mowing the lawn. And you don't have to go through the ordinances. You don't have to do anything but deal with the membership, come with a plan, come with an already existing example of something that you've done that's beautiful, whether it's in this town or whether it's documented. If you're interested in writing the grants, all the better, because they're already a nonprofit organization. So I have direct experience where I have found small grants on letsmove.gov, wrote the grants, submitted them through a church and through a nonprofit, and received both of those grants to do 2 different properties in the same city. And so it takes your own investment. If I would have came to the church and said, if you find a grant, then I'll put it in the garden, they don't care, they don't have a garden anyway. But when I said, you got a half an acre, I found this grant and I submitted for you and pay myself. If you pay yourself, you don't become a burden to anyone. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say about grant writing, so I'm a second-year student at Emory's School of Public Health, and we have grant writing courses, and a huge focus of the courses usually is working with community-based organizations and writing the grants for them. So like currently I'm writing a grant for a community-based organization here in Atlanta, and so are all of my classmates who were teams of that for. So in one class session, there are at least 5 different organizations that are being helped, and we constantly are looking, I think, our professors are looking into the community to find organizations or individuals who want grants. So if you are interested, just go to Emory's School of Public Health website, and there are contacts on there, but I think maybe reaching out to some of the institutional resources that you have here in Atlanta as well, and I'm sure Georgia State and Georgia Tech and some of the, Morehouse and Spelman, like these are institutions of higher learning that have courses where they're trying to get us engaged in the community, have special classes for us to be working on the ground, but it's rare that we really are able to make those connections except in spaces like this. So just as a heads up, if you are interested in that.
So just to be clear, you're volunteering to write grants.
Volunteering my colleagues.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the University of Georgia has one of the country's community public administration programs, and being a public administrator basically is being a bureaucrat and a grant writer. So just to put us down on the list as well, the University of Georgia, and I know that we're all always looking for things.
And what was the school again? The school?
School of Public Administration.
Public administration, I think. There's another, I'm running out of pages here, and our resource is oh, thank you.
Do you want to take this on?
Yeah.
As like a farm-based business is irrigating. What do you guys use?
Inline drip.
Inline drip? What's your water source?
We fluctuate between city water, and we also have 4 cisterns on the property that hold 600 gallons.
I don't know about Chris, but I think it's 1,700 gallons.
So we can actually internally change between going on city water and going on gray water.
What you need, right? You've got to have that backup because you got to water it one way or another. And you guys are using city water.
We have an irrigation here, which greatly changes the cost of the water. It used to buy about a third of what everybody else is paying. The initial cost is pretty expensive.
Could you just quickly say how you apply for that?
I mean, it's basically having a backflow preventer installed. Recently, somebody developed a backflow preventer that's not made of glass, it's made of plastic. It costs about $600 less. So that's a big part of your cost if you're looking at installing an irrigation meter. You have to go to the city and have a meter put if you don't already have a meter in place. And that's a huge cost, and then you have to pay a plumber to come in and put irrigation or backflow preventer on. And then you're supposed to have it, somebody come out and check it every once a year, inspect it. But it's about $4,000 to do initially. If you don't have, we've had help here and there. We've had some donation services from our plumber. And we already had a meter in place for that. A bunch. And then we're also using rainwater, underground cistern rainwater. We'll be able to do that.
So we actually irrigate from a rain-fed pond at the farm. It was a design of the development for the community. So where we currently hold a lot of water, there used to just be a really small spring and the developer of the property at East Lake Commons dug out a 600,000 gallon pond that's more or less a retention pond for rainwater that falls on the community, and all more or less gets sort of sewered into this pond where it's held. And then we use a 5 horsepower pump to move it, and through an underground 2-inch PVC network that we tap into at valves, also for drip irrigation as well too. If you guys aren't hip to drip, it's really the way that water plants. It's not very expensive. It's like the best use of it. Everybody is familiar enough with drip irrigation that we don't need to say much.
What are some of the reasons for purchasing drip irrigation?
I ordered from Berryhill Irrigation. They're down like around Equipment, Georgia. They're not nearly as friendly on the phone though as the guys out in California, DripWorks. Those guys will like shoot your ear a long time if you have a lot of questions about like what infrastructure, what hardware you need to set things up. So I might start there, and then when you get comfortable, call the Berryhill guys because the shipping's a lot cheaper.
Well, what Tourism Well has done is just recently, again with grant funding and whatnot, we revamped our entire irrigation system, and we've been using drip irrigation for some years. But we went to a type of drip irrigation that, because we change our beds a lot and all this kind of thing, we went to a type of drip irrigation that actually has an emitter instead of just a hole and a piece of tape. And we were able to find that at Ewing Irrigation up on Howard Hill.
Yeah, that's the one that we used to.
Yeah, the brown one. Brown hard kind of tube, and it's really nice. The other job here, probably, I don't know if it's brown job, that's a good question, I'm not sure. But the people at Ewing, again, like Joe was mentioning, you really want to deal with people that are friendly and that are helpful. And they've been very, very helpful for us. They actually specialize in golf courses, so they really understand how to make it beautiful and effective. The other thing I would like to add into the water piece is really focusing on soil structure and focusing on moisture, because all the water that we put out, we can definitely hold a lot more of it when we develop a soil structure that is rich in organic matter and that is being cropped with a diversity of crops, and also dealing with any kind of fruit trees or shade shrubs or things that are wind blocks, because all of that is once you put the water out, you're putting it in soil that has more organic matter, it goes away. You're putting it in a place where the wind just comes in and evaporates it. We have all these different issues. So this is where we want to start to study the ecology of the farm that we're on, and even the area that we're going to think about putting the farm in.
Yeah, what we're doing in the cities, we get a separate irrigation meter at certain sites.
Well, these guys are irrigating out of the well, so there's the only cost of electricity, and then that initial putting in the well. But if anybody, I can comment on like how to get a grant through the NRCS, if that's what folks want to hear about. But it's a very bureaucratic process. It takes a long time. You apply to one office, they send you to another office. Once they give you a number, and then they make you aware of the program. So.
Well, my question related to if you're going to another property owner like a church, how do you handle the water source? Is this a private property owner or a non-profit church? You get a separate irrigation meter, you reduce the cost, you put it in your lease, the church pays for water, which could be pretty high.
It was a very good question. So I'll say this, because of the fact the way Tourism Well is operating on 5 different sites throughout the city, each one of these situations has been very, very unique. And so 2 out of our 5 sites have wells on them. The other ones were sites where we either installed a meter, like Lou was talking about, and handled our irrigation ourselves. But when we first began, again, it was about the community. So we partnered with somebody who lived next door, ran hoses to our irrigation, said check your bill before you started dealing with us, check your bill afterward, and we paid the bill every month. And it was really just that simple. Establishing a relationship, going next door, and every month paying the bill, and making sure they have food.
One issue related to that, Doug Diller is dealing with farms, told me that you got to watch out for municipal water
website, they've seen some YouTube videos, read some books, and they come out to the farm and have all these questions about how we're handling things. And I say, okay, great. When you go to Whole Foods, do you know the name of the manager of the produce section? And they say no. Have you ever asked the manager of the produce section, have you gone out to the farm and seen how this is grown? And they say no. So immediately, once we get into certain structures, we suspend all of our intelligence and give it over to them. And then when we're in a room like this, when we can talk directly to the person, we start talking about really specifics. That same water that degrades the soil is the stuff we're brushing our teeth with and showering with. So, what you're saying is true. We're in a situation of serious, we're at the rubber meets the road, because if I'm using that water and the farm out in the rural area is using that water, it's no different. The difference is that I came to this conference and that farmer's out on his farm, because he doesn't want to be bothered with y'all asking him about chlorine. Hear what I'm saying to y'all? Yeah, of course we have all of this. That's why it's absolutely important that we build the soil structure, inoculate it with microorganisms, make sure we have active fungi, make sure we're doing all these things that will have to deal with the chlorine, because chlorine is indigenous to planet Earth. And we have everything we need to deal with it as long as we're not doing monocrops and stripping the soil. So that's where we become intelligent stewards of the land, because the water, we're not doing that intelligently.
I'll go back to Roxanne Paul.
Just as a little side note, I completely agree with what you're saying. But Paul Morgan, a local rainwater specialist in the city, is looking at ways to dechlorinize water. There are systems that you can buy that will dechlorinize, something that you might basically with potassium in between. And so there's ways of doing it if you don't want chlorine.
What was the name of that company? The rainwater?
Paul Morgan is the owner.
Rainwater
Rainwater harvest.
Rainwater harvest, okay. Also, I live Whole Foods. Okay. Marketing. We should talk about marketing. Marketing and packaging. What specifically about packaging? Was that was on the list?
Well, our packaging and marketing, some of the going into the whole organic things, say plastics. Do you guys take that into consideration in packaging your produce? Who do you use? Do you have some resources? You know,
It's all pretty simple. We just use food-grade plastic bags, mostly. I guess plastic landfills, residue, or cardboard containers. But I buy all of these supplies at Matthew's Hamper House at the Forest Park Farmers Market. I don't know of any farmers that don't do that.
Yeah, sure.
Right? If you have like a huge volume, you may want to order from somebody and just how much it you, but they'll sell you boxes that are manageable and storable. Matthew's Hamper House. Or Satisfaction Better.
So there are a lot of places at the state farmers market and Forest Park that offer supplies for farmers. I mean, that's what it used to be. And it still is. It's sort of limping along as a resource for farmers. But there's also, companies like Uline,
Right.
that offer those kinds of like food-grade plastics. And
There's a lot of biodegradable plastic stuff out there these days. I wouldn't go about putting it in your compost pile and trying to behave that way. But it is ultimately probably it's better for you. I have done enough research on like getting it for our farm packaging system, but all of the packaging that we use on the farm is not regulated. So like I don't all I need to say is that the only thing, I don't have to have like a license to put vegetables in a plastic bag or have an inspector come and inspect my wash station or anything like that. I just have to leave the bag open at the top when I go to the farmer's market.
And the other thing that I would sort of generally say is, if you want to do this for a living, pick the 2 or 3 things that are most important to you in running your operation, and don't try to do everything right, or you'll just get overwhelmed. I mean,
yourself and know what you won't compromise on and know what you're willing to compromise on. Marketing, let's talk a little bit about where to go, what to do, how do you find your market?
So I'll just really quickly tell you guys a little bit about our marketing strategy. It's kind of a philosophy for us. We really believe in having a very diversified marketing strategy that's also integrated. So all these different markets that we sell to all work together, and they're somewhat prioritized. So we've got, at the foundation of our marketing plan, 100 member CSA program. That really is the premise for all of the planning that I make on the farm. It's what I decide to put into my rotations. It informs the packaging. And it informs sort of like the farm's economic heartbeat, I guess, if you will. That's where I know we need to have, at the very minimum, enough to fulfill this community-supported agriculture group. But I always want to, what happens, regardless of whether I necessarily spend too much time planning on it or not, there's always more to deal with than I need for that 100-member CSA. And the funny thing is, it differs depending on the week and what the harvest is, how much there is to deal with. So I sell at a farmer's market as well, Thursday afternoons in the East Atlanta Village, and that can eat up a lot of this excess produce. It's also great visibility for our farm. It works really well with the CSA as long as I can sort of offset these harvest days and not overburden my plants with harvesting them too much. It works really well, but Eugene probably feels the same way as I do. When June and July hit, it's like, what just happened? All of a sudden, we've got like 3 to 4 times more volume that we're dealing with, or weight that we're dealing with, than is typical of the farm's metabolism throughout the year. So I do also work with like some restaurants on a perennial basis, so I'll make email availabilities every week to these restaurants. But when that big surplus hits, I won't have to plan what to do with it because I don't want to sit on it and I don't want to give it away. So what I do is I augment the number of restaurant customers that I work with by, just sort of staying loosely in touch with restaurant folks and being really honest with them. I'm not always going to have a lot of produce, but if I do have a lot, I promise I'll send you an email. You can just not reply to me if you don't want it. No big deal. And then, as you get further up the food chain, there's a great food hub here in the Atlanta area. I work with this guy, Michael Shank from the Turnip Truck, and I know Trudy Living Well has sold produce to him as well, and he can take large volumes of produce. And if you are like producing a tremendous amount, you may want to look at like a bigger wholesale marketing interaction. But I do feel like when you get to that level, that's probably going to start to inform what you decide to grow just as much as figuring out what to do with the produce. So all these markets feed into each other in a way that just makes sense on our weekly harvest schedule. Yes.
So I have a question from the other end of the marketing side, the consumer side. So other than platforms like this, how does someone who's not involved in growing go out and support, doing this? How do we get involved in, other than going to the farmer's market, for example, which is to be credit to the goal. Do you want to work? Or no, just kind of supporting in getting people buying from you, and getting publicity from people who are just starting out, and being able to say yeah, this is where I bought my ideas this week, how can we help? Because I think a lot of people might want to help smaller farmers who don't know.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is word of mouth.
Join the CSA.
Yeah, join the CSA.
You also have 2 good resources in the room. You can definitely go to the Georgia Organics website, and you also have Boxcar Roaster right here that's sitting in the front row in Allison Cross. And Boxcar Roaster is one of the stores, many of the stores in Atlanta. We have actually a pretty wide variety of stores that specialize in local produce. And if they don't, and you shop there, talk to them. Like I said, you're the other end of it.
I'd like to piggyback on that and say, really, it's there's a holism to it. So shop at restaurants that buy eat at restaurants that buy local food, shop at grocers that buy local food products, and buy those products when you're inside there.
Yeah.
And these things, these systems all feed themselves. Go to Whole Foods, they're supporting a ton of farmers locally and regionally, and buy those products that you want from
That's what
there.
I've been doing, but I mean, other than that, like, what, you know, is there a way to demand more of that? Because there are weeks where I'm like, oh, I have this great recipe, and the closest thing that's grown is in California for that recipe. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're not doing that. Is it because I just feel guilty buying
Well, some of that
stuff?
seasonality and some,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
Judith and I buy coffee every single week. I can't imagine life without it, even though we can't produce it.
Yeah.
Regionally, are we united sometimes when it's
Right, it's not.
seasonal?
Yes.
This is an ignorant question probably, but your DeKalb farmer's market on Ponce, crowded all the time. What is their openness to working with a local farmer network? I'm always struck whenever I go there that there's not more local stuff that I know is grown here on the shelf. So what's the
We
deal
know it's
there?
voted the best farmer's market in Atlanta. Every single year.
Huh?
Voting poll.
Yeah, this is a sensitive topic for me. Your DeKalb farmer's market, it is not a farmer's market. It is a wholesaler of produce.
And that's fine. I mean, that's fine. Whatever it is, grocery chain, whatever. Why can't we get more local stuff in there?
I think you have to speak to the owner of the store, and you demand it, like that's that feedback that when.
They are expanding like 1 million square retail space, beginning construction like in January in that retail location.
But
I'm just curious what they tell you guys when you go to them. Like, what do they say?
I don't know.
I have from like a donation standpoint, and if anybody can track them, let me know, because I've had no community interest whatsoever from them. I mean, and I think there's awesome things that they do. I mean, I love the international flair and
They're
all the
hiring
food. Yeah, I
schools.
mean, it's great, but not much buy into what we're about. So.
So there's your thing, start complaining at your DeKalb farmer's market about Yes.
Can you speak to just how to build your CSA? You said you had 100 members. How do you, day one, how do you build your CSA?
Eugene would have a whole lot of perspective to this too, but actually, our whole conception of our CSA is going to relate to partnerships when we get to talking about it, so I might not talk too much about that, but through the course of our CSA career, we partnered with other farmers to increase the number of customers that we can serve in our CSA and also increase the diversity of food in our CSA. But we just started really small, so before I actually grew a single vegetable at that first farm in Douglas County, the Glover family farm, a woman that is with a faith-based organization, she's with the Unitarian Universalist congregation, was looking for a CSA farmer to come to their Sunday worship. I don't actually think they call it worship, but to come on Sunday and set up and deliver and sort of offer a CSA program there. And I was a brand new farmer without a single market, and so I thought that it would be a great idea and a great way to have them in. And that first year, Judith and I had something in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 CSA members, and every year, word of mouth and visibility and really just becoming a little bit better at what we were doing allowed us to take on more CSA customers. But at some point, we were also selling at a really good, very, very, very busy farmers market that was growing rapidly as well too. And we knew we could grow enough food for both of these markets, so we just chose the CSA as our primary channel instead of the farmers market. To give sort of more of our farmers.
I just want to add that because I think it's an important point. If you've never done a CSA before, I don't know how you feel about this. That first year, we didn't spend a penny of that money until we got through the whole season because we were so scared that we weren't going to be able to fulfill the obligation. So if you're a new grower and you're starting a CSA, I think it's a good idea to start small and be sure that you can deliver what you've promised.
For running your CSA, I'm sorry, on the IT side, like on the software, is there a particular program that you guys?
Microsoft Excel.
That's it?
There's a lot that you can plug into, like if you get growing for market, it's a great application. There's software and online sites. Your information, your CSA listing in the cloud. Go ahead.
Well, there's when Truly Living Well began, we would harvest food, Rashid and myself, we'd go out with the van, park on Abernathy across from Soul Vegetarian in front of the Goodwill, and we'd take the produce out and we'd walk up and down the street and say, will you look at it? Will you look at it? Will you look at it? None of people have to do that because that work has been done. And so there right now is more demand than there is supply. So building your market, you know, we continue to go back to the same point. Do excellent work. Make it, when your food comes out of the market, Joe said, he said, as we got better, we got more CSA. And it's just that simple. You have to start and you have to continue. There are so many people who say they want to be in this urban ag movement. We have trainees going through our program right now, and maybe one will do it. And maybe one will do it for more than a season. So if you do it, why are we sitting in front of you? Joe is not, he didn't inherit a family farm from 20 years ago. He's been farming how many years? 8 years, and he's the resident expert at an ALFI convention. 8 years. That's consistency. And it may seem like a long time or a short time, depending on how you're hearing the inflection in my voice. But understand, my grandfather is a Native American of this country who had an 80-acre farm before I came to be. Right? So when we look at what it is that allows us to grow, it's the fact that we keep growing, that we consistently do it. We cannot offer you any tricks. We can offer you, oh, you have to get up with this. Right? We were talking the other day about how great the rain was. Right? You know, I was saying, oh, the rain was great. What did it mean? It meant being out there in the mud, sticking measure. So that is the only thing that's going to stop your CSA from growing is your own lack of actually sticking to it. Being a farmer is the most amazing work on the planet. Farmers are getting ready to return to the leadership role in our community.
Question I have is that you have a lot of people asking about CSAs and the marketing aspect of it. And I have a lot involved in that. How do you come up with your pricing? What's your pricing model? How do you determine if a tomato should be $4? How do you determine if a carrot should be $1?
Tanisha, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, so as the sales purveyor for Truly Living Well, I use roughly 3 indexes, pricing indexes. You can Google pricing index and find the ones that you may want to use, but I basically compare prices from Destiny Organics. I use the Rodale Institute's Organic Pricing Index, and I use the USDA, and then I just look for a couple of markets, you know, that exist online, and just see what averages out, you know, for the type of items that we sell. So if it's heirloom tomatoes, if I find that the average is around, you know, $5 a pound or $4 a pound, whatever it may be, I make my determination on if it should be a little bit less or a little bit higher. You know, you go with what you feel comfortable with for the value of your food. But those pricing indexes are pretty much standards, if you will, especially USDA and Rodale Institute. You can also use the University of Kentucky. They have a pricing index as well. And then back to the grassroots, I drive around the markets and see what everybody else is selling it for. And simple as that. Just see if we're within the range of what they're, you know, what they're selling for. That's about it, really. It's pretty simple. And let me say that you'll find that there are items that maybe they don't talk about on USDA or Rodale. One thing TLW specialize in a lot of, you know, like rare and exotic food, if you will. So kind of just use also your own common sense. Heavier foods are a lower price per pound. Lighter foods are a heavier price per pound. So if it's a, you know, some rare radish or something that nobody else is selling, but you know, okay, radishes kind of average out the same price as maybe sweet potatoes or something of that weight, then just kind of, you know, use that as a determining factor too. Just the weight of that item compared to something else that would take on like a similar weight. And what does that item go for? But outside of that, yeah, it's really just, you know, making sure that what you have is also of the quality that you're charging for it too. You know, again, I haven't experienced that at TLW, but I have gone to markets where things don't look like the value of what somebody's selling it to me for. I personally wouldn't pay the price that they're charging because their food doesn't look like it matches that quality. So make sure excellence is a part of what you're bringing to the table. You can get whatever you charge, whatever you say for it.
And there's retail and wholesale too. Those are two different price points.
Right.
So if you're selling it to somebody that's going to have to mark it up in some capacity, you can't sell it at the direct retail price you would. You can, but you won't have a lot of success selling it. You sell it at that direct retail price that you would sell it for through your CSA program or the farmer's market.
So here's a question to the audience. You're a farmer, you're growing food, you have a CSA, you have a market, you sell to restaurants. You sell to restaurants for less or more or the same? Less. More. Why more? Because they can pay. Okay, less.
What else?
Is it the same? So you're selling it at a retail price to a restaurant?
And they still retail price. I would say I wouldn't sell it for more because they could go to the market and buy it and see what the price is at the market. So I wouldn't.
That's an additional question for that. So the price of the plate of food that you paid for at that restaurant, could you make it at home for that same price or for less?
Oh, way less.
So they're marking it up, right? From what value? Retail or wholesale?
Wholesale.
No retail. Retail. So that's why when Joe's talking about wholesale and retail, the people you sell it wholesale for are to stores.
Right.
Because they're not going to change it at all. I understand?
I do want to point out that when I sell to restaurants, I sell to wholesale.
So
They've got an additional labor cost to put into it, and they're taking all the risk in selling the product by having bought it from me already. So everybody can do it a lot differently, but pricing is all based on what you can sell it for. So
there you go. That's the main
point. Here's like where it comes back around on you though, is that there's also something to be said by continued customer service. So like if folks think you consistently give them a good price for it, you're going to find yourself in a pinch where you're going to need to sell a little bit more than you may on a typical week, and that system comes back around to help you as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. On the topic of like pricing and stuff, like say living on this college student budget, I've passed my days where I used to shop at Kroger, and now I'm trying to shop at farmers markets and at Whole Foods, and a lot of times I'm just like, I'm running out of money, what am I doing? And it's tough for me to see how, like, my family's from Columbia, I stayed there for a couple months in the summer, and it's amazing. I can go across the street to a little corner store and buy healthy food for cheaper than the food at McDonald's, where over here it just seems like the unhealthy food is more affordable than my healthy options. Is that just going to change over time when this starts to be the demand for food?
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, I guess my response to that is that nobody up here is making their fortune just yet. So the profit margins are pretty slim even with what may seem like these higher prices at the farmers markets. Like, we operate a very, very small business and employ, in addition to ourselves, 2 full-time people every season, and I have to consistently pay those folks whether the climate's giving me a tremendous amount of value or not from year to year. But I guess it's just like shopping responsibly. Buy what you can, but don't overextend yourself. I don't know how to necessarily say it, but they do say that that as there are more people that are involved in growing food, I do think the price may come down just a little bit, but I wouldn't say be prepared for it to come down tremendously in the future. Because farmers will get really creative about where to sell.
And I appreciate you letting me record. It's just for just a window into what happened here today. My question actually kind of moves us into the areas of like infrastructure, distribution, and partnerships. And I'm just wondering, we've talked a lot about how to maybe start a farm. What I'm really wondering is what other services and infrastructure and businesses are needed to really support that growth. You know, we can say, yes, we need more production, but in order to kind of facilitate that production, what do you see as the greatest needs in our local area to help farmers really be effective and be able to make, you know, make a living with as little risk, I guess, as possible?
If I could, I'd like to answer that and continue with the marketing piece. When we spoke about marketing, we primarily spoke about marketing produce. And again, TLW started as an LLC for-profit business and did not have the growth that it has now until it shifted into a nonprofit organization focusing on training. So think about the things that can be marketed. Market the education. Market. How many of you paid to come to this conference? Okay. They were marketing not the food, they were marketing the fact that you be able to sit and listen and reason with experts in the field. You have a valuable resource in your experience. Market your experience as much as you can market the food. Right? Books, whatever you need to do, webisodes, DVDs, whatever, so that you have something that augments that other part. So what we need as long as to really foster the local food movement and the increase in production are people that can make it hip and fashionable and make people want to do it. Just like every other industry was created. People didn't know anything about Coca-Cola. And now people drink it like crazy because they went behind and created the need. Made you believe that your life is not the same unless you have this. And it was a complete luxury, like getting your hair done, your nails done, or any of those, and those industries continue to prosper because the whole ideology is being built upon.
I have a question for you, suppose. This is full time like anyone else in the way it's a new school ag startup. If you're doing something particularly interesting, aquaponics, mycology, remediation, those types of things, I'd love to chat. And while we're talking about marketing, are there any state-based resources for marketing our products to folks overseas? So if I'm in an herbal supplement niche, are there folks who will work with me so that we can figure out what the warehouse change is, how we deal with excise and tariffs, and what are the groups that we need to jump through to sell to folks who will pay top dollar for uniform dust or whatever it is?
Well, a lot of folks would like, I mean, it depends on what kind of research you want. You can apply for a SARE grant.
Sustainable agriculture research.
And they'll pay you to sort of submit, the data that you come up with. But
I think that the Georgia Department of Agriculture exists to help figure out how to get food products to places far flung. I mean,